everyone to our speaker series on the principles of nonviolence. We're glad you are here tonight with us, either in the studio audience or on camera or on the live stream with us. We are here to choose justice today, to be on the side of justice as our topic for today. My name is Julie Gallegos. I'm the Associate Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity of the St. Vrain Valley. Habitat is a worldwide organization, and we believe that we would like to see, our vision is to see a world where everyone has a decent place to live, and that is everyone. And in order to do that, we are about breaking down barriers, about building bridges, and we believe that decent housing is a key to a just society. And so we're going to do that with Habitat for Humanity by building each of our homes with love to be a part of the beloved community. Habitat for Humanity is the facilitator of these speaker series, but we also have our partners at Central Longmont and the folks who are recording us tonight from Longmont Public Media. And there are a bunch of other endorsements from Nepali Jatra, the Longmont Multicultural Action Committee, the Executive Committee for African American Cultural Events, the Center for African American and African Studies at CU, I Have a Dream Foundation, Heart of Longmont, Bright Collaborative, the Asian Pacific Association of Longmont, Recovery Cafe, the Center for People with Disabilities, are all part of this series. We hope that you have been inspired and challenged by our last two speakers that we have had. If you haven't heard them, you can still do that. They are recorded and on our Habitat for Humanity YouTube channel or on Longmont Public Media's YouTube channel. This is the third in a series of 6 presentations on principles of nonviolence, also sometimes called Kingian nonviolence. Those principles in a nutshell are courage, understanding, justice, transformation, love, and hope. So the format of our series is that I'm going to explain the principle to you, and then we have a wonderful community leader who will come and explain their experience with the principle. Dr. King, in a speech after the 1956 Montgomery bus boycott victory in the Supreme Court with the desegregation of buses, is quoted as saying, "The end about beloved community, the end is reconciliation, the end is redemption, the end is the creation of the beloved community." It is this type of spirit, this type of love that can transform opponents into friends. It is this type of goodwill that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of men. Tonight we are here to talk about our third principle, which is that nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice or evil, not people. So this is an interesting one because it has 2 parts, that the struggle is about the systems of injustice and not about the individuals. They are a part of the system. And so it's important to remember the dignity and the worth of our opponents in the struggle. What is justice? Justice is a legal term, but I like this definition a little more. How love is expressed in public life. So how love shapes policy and our community. If love is what guides our personal relationships, then justice is what guides our community. And if justice guides our community, then everyone is impacted by unjust systems, even those who created the system. So that, I think, is one of the most difficult parts about this principle itself, that nonviolence recognizes that evildoers are also victims and are not evil people. So if we are interested in creating the beloved community, we need to talk about dismantling unjust systems. We can't pretend that everything is fine. The absence of tension is not peace. That might just be the absence of tension in your own personal circle. That does not mean that there is not tension and issues in the world. And so we need to not ignore issues. We can't stay silent. We can't avoid conflict. And we can't stay to our comfort zones. We can't be complacent and masking our need for personal safety or personal space or personal peace as just masking our complacency in the unjust system. This is not passive. This is an active thing. And it also doesn't wait. Dr. King, in his letter to Birmingham jail, talks about how the time is now. A lot of people are saying you need to just wait. There's no waiting. Justice is now. Because if we believe people can change, we believe that systems can change. So my example from the civil rights for this tonight's topic is from the Birmingham campaign of 1963. So at the time, in the 1960s, Birmingham, Alabama, was the worst, most segregated town in all of the country. Bull Connor was the police commissioner who used the police force to enforce in every way possible this segregation. Does anyone know what Birmingham's nickname was? Bombingham. There were 50 bombings of homes, churches, and other gathering places in 20 years. 50. Can you imagine one bombing of a personal home in Longmont, Colorado? This was just so commonplace. And the picture I chose because this was a home that was bombed. I believe it was Fred Shuttleworth home. And there's a sign outside that says dangerous. It's hard to tell that the home was bombed. There's people looking. But then there's also 2 little girls walking to school because this was so common. It was the worst lynching area in the whole country. There are 30 to 33 in the turn of the century accounted for lynchings. That does not mean that that was all that was there. By all accounts, it was a pretty horrible place to be, and probably an extremely scary place to be Black, and probably an extremely privileged place to be white. I use this example because the nonviolent protesters used peaceful demonstrations. They were met with all kinds of violence, but they continued to be peaceful. And that revealed the cruelty of the segregation and revealed how awful things were in Birmingham. And that led to systematic transformation. But they weren't about dehumanizing the police or the business owners. They were about exposing the injustice. Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail was written from this campaign where he had been arrested for not having the right permit for marching. And there's lots of really great information in Letter from a Birmingham Jail, lots of great quotes, but one I pulled out for tonight was, will we be extremists for hate, or will we be extremists for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice, or for the cause of justice? So that leads us to our speaker tonight. I would have the privilege of introducing Father Teri Harroun, who is the priest of the Light of Christ Church, an ecumenical Catholic church here in Longmont, Colorado. Teri is a spiritual leader, also a poet, a published author, a friend, a mother, and an invaluable community member. And when I asked her, she did not hesitate to say yes. And she is warm and funny and very encouraging. And I would love to welcome up Father Teri Harroun.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you, Habitat. Thank you for Longmont Public Media. Thank you to all the sponsors and all the speakers. And thank you, last but not least, to all of those who are either showing up for this speaker series, watching it online, or finding the videos. All of us together are taking our time and investing our energy into learning about and creating beloved community here in the St. Vrain Valley. Because we're talking about justice today, I thought we should start with a land acknowledgement. Now, I know there's some pros and cons to land acknowledgements. The real con is if we think that this is the answer, if we think that this is the product or the ending. Land acknowledgements are just the beginning. So as you hear this land acknowledgement, I invite you to open your heart and your mind as if this is a beginning and it's leading you somewhere related to justice. Let us acknowledge that we are meeting here on the ancestral land of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations. We admit that they were driven from this land by colonial expansion, benefiting white settlement. In spite of that history, we seek to be true allies of our Indigenous siblings. We also honor the diverse and vibrant Indigenous community members who make their home here in Boulder County today. So as we start, my friends, I'd like to invite you to think about the person in your life who is your mother's mother. Think about your mother's mother and what you know about her. We are all in different places. Some of us know a lot about her. Some of us know very little. Some of us know nothing at all, not even her name. Some of us had good relationships with her. Some of us did not. But every one of us has a mother's mother. Think of your mother's mother. And think of one thing that you would tell as the story of her if someone asked you, tell me about your mother's mother. I start with this today because 20 years ago in 2006, when I started seminary at Iliff School of Theology, I was blessed to have as one of my professors a man named Dr. Vincent Harding. And Dr. Harding, for me, is the one who woke up my passion for justice and taught me about these principles and beloved community. And so it would not be justice if I pretended like I just knew all of this. I was taught this, and Dr. Harding began that teaching within me. And whenever I had a class with Dr. Harding, the very first class as his icebreaker, he went around the room and asked each and every person, tell me about your mother's mother. Now, I might ask you to do that later today, but I wouldn't ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So let me tell you about my mother's mother. I called her Grandma Jones. Her first name was Pearl. She was the only person that I knew in my life who could tell my father that he was wrong about something. And I wanted to have that quality, but I don't. My grandma and Grandpa Jones, they had a pool table in their basement. It wasn't for kids, it was for grown-ups, but we could go down and watch them. And there was a pool shot. I don't know anything about pools, so I think that's what it's called, a pool shot. And there was a pool shot named after my grandmother. It was called the Pearly. And the Pearly went like this. She would hit the cue ball, and it would hit all four sides of the table without touching a single ball. That was the Pearly. In my sophomore year of high school, my Grandma Jones died, and she was the first person that I ever knew who died. And even though I'm a priest and a pastor now, every single death that I have been part of since then, where I have walked the end-of-life journey with people, every single one of them, my Grandma Jones has come to mind. That's my Grandma Jones. What I've come to realize in the last 20 years is that when Dr. Harding started class with "Tell me about your mother's mother," that what he was really doing was helping us to begin to build beloved community together. All the pillars that we're talking about are part of sharing these stories. Because when I tell you about my mother's mother, you learn something about my Grandma Jones, but you learn something about me as well. When we share stories like that, "Tell me about your mother's mother," it helps us build understanding of each other. It might raise feelings of compassion or even inspiration. It might bring forth questions. When we tell each other stories like about our mother's mother, we're reminded of a commonality that we share together while also honoring our diversity. When Dr. Harding would do this in the classroom, it would remind us all that we are part of something larger than ourselves, not just the group gathered together, but our families and our ancestors and our cousins. Dr. Harding loved to invoke the ancestors, and I think that's part of why he loved to ask this question. And as I've been preparing for this today, I have been invoking Dr. Harding as much as I could. When we share stories like this, we are doing what Carmen talked about last week with understanding. We are sharing heart to heart. And when we do that, not only do we build understanding, but we do it in a way that is nonviolent and filled with love and connected to hope. It's something that we can practice together, and we don't have to agree politically. We don't have to agree religiously. We don't have to agree on much of anything. But it helps us to listen to each other and share in our humanity together. Today we're talking about the third principle, the justice principle, engaging issues, but not individuals. All of the principles of social justice are connected to justice. All of these principles of nonviolence that we're speaking about are connected to justice. It's like justice becomes the work of the beloved community. And when I think of justice, I think of us as working for the flourishing of all. And yes, that means the oppressor and the oppressed. We are working for the flourishing of all, those who make the systems that are unjust and those who are marginalized by those systems. Now, as I've been preparing for today, I've been imagining that many of you are coming to hear about the big things that we can do with justice. The big, effective, organized things. The protests, the boycotts, the strikes, the letter writing, the singing campaigns, all of that. And that's not really what I'm going to talk about today. Oh, those things are important, don't get me wrong. But what I want to talk about is how do we make justice a way of life? How do we make justice something that we think about and do actively every single day? Because when we can cultivate justice individually and in small groups as a way of life, then when we get together for the big things, they will be even more effective. For me, and I say this as disclosure, a lot of my ideals of justice are rooted in Jesus. They don't have to be for you. I don't care if you know anything about Jesus. Justice work doesn't have to be part of religion or spirituality. Justice work is the work of humanity. We are talking about human issues. But for me, it is rooted in the teachings and the life of Jesus as well. And when I say that, I talk about his particular teachings to love. Jesus teaches us to love God, to love our neighbor, to love the strangers, to love our enemies. Jesus talks about love in a way that means showing up and doing something for each other, caring for each other, tending and mending, celebrating, lifting each other up. That's the love that Jesus talks about for me. And the metaphor or the parable that he gives us, and actually he gives us several, but I'm going to talk about one. It comes from the Gospel of John, and it happens the night before he dies. And mostly in Christianity, we hear about the night before he dies and there was a meal. And yes, there was a meal. But in the Gospel of John, the night before he dies, he takes and ties a towel around his waist, and he gets down on the floor and he washes the feet of everyone in that room. It was an action of love. It was an action of tending and caring. It was an action where he lowered himself, made himself vulnerable, and then got into the muck that was stuck on the people that were in that room with him. That's the image of love that Jesus gives to me and inspires my work of justice today. To do something, to be willing to be vulnerable, to care and to tend, to be willing to get in the muck that is stuck to people. Now, justice as a way of life means that we are not looking out at others all the time. We are looking in at ourselves. We are looking at ourselves and where we need to change, and we need to grow, and we need to transform. It's like what Gandhi says, be the change that you want to see in the world. We start with ourselves. That can be with rituals, religious rituals or not. It can be with education. It certainly is about welcoming challenges, whether it's from individuals or groups. When we do justice as a way of life and look at ourselves, we are willing then to transform our own thinking and our own way of being. When we do justice work looking at ourselves, we learn what our passions are, because there are a lot of justice issues, my friends. We have to find our passions so we know our lane. And we have to know what our gifts and skills are. When I do my own justice work, the first thing that I must do is look at my own privilege. I was born and have acquired many privileges throughout my life. I'm a white woman in the United States. I'm a Christian in the United States. I'm a clergy person. It gives me a lot of privilege and access. I have privilege related to education. I have economic privilege. I have physical privilege, right? And I know this, and I'm so aware of it now, and I don't want to take it for granted, because if you saw me 2 years ago, I was not a healthy woman, and I was on oxygen for the year, and I drug around a little canister of oxygen, and at home I had a 50-foot leash, a cannula, that I was tied to a box, right? So I don't want to take for granted that I have privileges of a physical body that can get access to places. When I do justice work, I need to look at my privilege. I can't just look at unjust systems. I need to look at those systems and say, how have I, with my privilege, benefited from those systems? Have I been complicit as those systems were formed? And I need to disrupt and dismantle my own privilege. I need to invite inner transformation, and that can be hard work, because it can be work of sacrifice, and it can make us realize how vulnerable we are. But I cannot just commit to changing what is outside of myself. I have to change what is within. Now, I also need to look at my privilege and be aware that it can be a tool of justice as well, but not isolated. I need to work with people who do not enjoy the privileges that I have, and find out how I can use my privilege in order to assert the works of justice. So one of the ways that I do this is through my own discernment with prayer and with poetry. A lot of times in my prayer and in my discernment, things come out as poems. So I am going to read a few of my poems for you here tonight. The first poem is one that I wrote this year in January, on January 8th. That was the day after Renee Good died. She is the young woman in Minneapolis who was killed by one of the ICE agents out in the streets. And this poem is called, So I Slept on It. So I slept on it. One of my many privileges waits until tomorrow. Maybe something will make sense in the morning. Give someone else time to figure this out. So I slept on it. I didn't even dream about it, which is sad in its own way. I didn't dream of witnessing a shooting, or the children who lost their mother, or the horrors of being shot, or even being the shooter. Oh, thank God I didn't dream that. But I did wake up humming that song from Wicked, For Good. I have been changed. I have been changed. I have been changed for good. By good with a capital G, by Renee Good, a poet. She was a poet. Today, she should be waking up a poet, a mom, a partner, an activist, a woman from Colorado Springs. But she didn't get one more sleep. Instead, I slept on it. And I have been changed by good with a capital G. And just to clear the air, I ask forgiveness for the things I've done complicit, explicit, implicit, and what I have failed to do as well. I guess there's blame to share. So I slept on it. But I am awake now. You can call it woke if you need to. A trained man would have shot her tires, would have taken down her license plate number for later, would have honored that this is not a lethal moment, would have stepped further aside. A man in a mask did not do that. Did he sleep last night? Has he also been changed for good? I will pray. I will cry, I will write, I will march, I will preach, I will poet, I will vision, I will learn, I will not look away, I will manifest, I will stay awake, I will stay awoke, I will call out, I will demand, I will get in my car today, hold on to my steering wheel, and remember that I have been changed by good with a capital G, for good. And just to clear the air, Renee is the icon, the window to the divine, shining a light on all those who rightfully fear those in masks with guns. She shines a light on the liars, the story manglers, the callous leaders who trust that we will sleep on it. We will sleep. We will lull ourselves to sleep. But not this time, for we have been changed for good. I thought part of how we could talk about justice as a way of life would be to talk about how I teach that to some of the youth in our church, Light of Christ. So I've been on staff since 2011. I've only been the pastor since 2017. But 4 times since 2011, I have prepared and led groups of youth to go to nearby reservations. 3 times it was to Pine Ridge, which is the Lakota reservation in the southwest corner of South Dakota. Once it was to Wind River. I myself went to high school and college in South Dakota. I know people who live on Pine Ridge or have lived, so I'm much more attuned with what happens in Pine Ridge. And so I thought I'd talk to you about some of the things I talk to the youth about. We spend months preparing for this week. We go for a week, and then we spend about 2 months processing what we experienced. The first thing I talk to the kids about is, we are not going on a mission trip. Mission is language of the colonizer. In fact, mission has been a tool of the colonizer to oppress. The Lakota people know about mission, and so we are not going on a mission trip. What we are going on is a cross-cultural immersion trip. We understand and honor that we have a culture ourselves. We're going to cross the boundary. We're going to go to Pine Ridge, and we are going to enter into a different culture. And we are going to immerse ourselves in that culture for a while and hopefully learn from them. Now, I will say, usually at this point, one of the youth raises their hands and says, Father Teri, I get it. I've heard this phrase, and I think this is what you mean. It goes like this. If you teach a man to fish. Oh, no, that's not how it even goes. See, I'm so not into the phrase that I can't even do it right. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And I say, no, that's not really what we're going to do. I mean, it's an interesting metaphor, but think about this. We're going to a reservation where Lakota people live, indigenous people, and you think we have something about fishing that we can teach them? No. And then they get that right away, and then I say, but now do you see what I did? I use stereotypes of people in order to talk about them. That's something else we're going to have to dismantle and disrupt, and we need to do it together with each other. So I say, think about it more like this. Let's use this image. If we gave someone a fish, we could feed them for a day. If we taught them how to fish, maybe we could feed them for a life. But if we sit down and listen to their story, what we might find out is that we poisoned the lake. That's the image that I want us to take. The other thing about this is your initial metaphor sounds like we're some kind of savior. We are not the saviors. We are not going to Pine Ridge to save people. We are going to Pine Ridge to learn, to maybe be invited into people's homes, to maybe share a cup of tea or a prayer or a story together, to share something of our lives and to create relationship. I remind the youth that it has taken generations and centuries for us to get here. Where we want to be now is on the arc of justice that we trust in. We want to be part of healing, not healing them, but part of healing the relationship that we share together, and to recognize that we all need liberation. I also remind the youth that we are not going to Pine Ridge to take Jesus to people. That is not our job. That is not needed. In fact, that's part of why ecumenical is in our name, the Ecumenical Catholic Communion, because we don't think we have the one right, only way to be in relationship with God. In fact, we honor that God is in the world in maybe 7-8 billion different ways. And we want to find out how other people experience God. And trust me, God, the divine breath of God, the Great Spirit are already at Pine Ridge. We don't need to take Jesus to them. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to cross boundaries. And when we do that, my friends, that means we are going to get out of our comfort zones. And more than that, we are going to be uncomfortable. I am specifically going to take the youth to places where they will experience discomfort, be uncomfortable. I would never take them anywhere unsafe. That's not the point. But there are some things that we can only learn if we get out of our comfort zones and experience the world and life in a different way. And in that discomfort, we can have the seeds of justice planted within us and ready to go. I do tell the youth that when we come home, we will come home changed. We will see ourselves different, our home different, our community different. We will have a different lens. And all these things that I talk to them about are not for 1 week. There are all kinds of things that we can do to create justice as a way of life. So in 2024, we had a group that went to Pine Ridge. I was not healthy enough to go. This is when I was on oxygen. So I want to give a shout out to Mark and Mary Lou from Light of Christ, who took the youth that I did the preparation with, and they went to Pine Ridge. And they wrote a poem and a prayer before they left, and we gave it to all the members of our community so we could be praying for them. But I think this helps you hear how someone might incorporate the values of justice as a way of life into their life. So they say, "Dear God, on our journey to Pine Ridge, please help us to provide services to help those in need, improve our knowledge of the world, navigate new experiences with an open mind, embrace others' culture and stories, reflect on ourselves and our relationship with God, introduce ourselves and connect with new people, develop new skills, get outside of our comfort zone, and enjoy the experience. Amen." And if you could see their prayer, the first letter of every line spells out Pine Ridge. So I also want to talk here about cultural misappropriation. It was a question that I had for Carmen 2 weeks ago when she was the speaker. And apparently a lot of people could hear that it was my voice. I've had a lot of questions about cultural misappropriation those 2 weeks. So cultural appropriation kind of happens naturally sometimes. We have to call it out in each other. Cultural misappropriation happens when we're starting to do the learning. We're starting to do the listening. We're doing the heart-to-heart listening. We're building the conversations. We're learning stuff. We're getting excited. We appreciate what we're learning. And then we think, well, I'm going to do that too. So here's an example. When I took the youth to Pine Ridge in 2014, on the very last night, and it wasn't just us, we were with a group of about 60 people. On the very last night, some of the Lakota people came to bless us. There was drumming and there was singing, and they prayed over us, and they had these oyster shells in these sage bundles, and the bundles were burning, and they went in front of each person and they wafted that onto each of us and blessed each of us. And it was a very moving moment. And then the youth and I came back, and in our processing, it was one of the highlights of the week. And so we said, okay, when we do our homily and share with the people of Light of Christ what happened at Pine Ridge, let's do that blessing. And so we had sage bundles, and we had oyster shells, and we did this for all the people who were there. Now, we did it out of appreciation. But nobody on the reservation said, hey, we're going to give you this blessing to go share it with others. We took it. It wasn't ours to take. And that's part of what happens when we do the justice work. And it's something we need to call each other out on, because cultural misappropriation is not the work of justice. I think most of us realize that justice work is hard and it is challenging. It can be despairing. We can want to give up. And here's part of why I think that is. For most of us, we are dedicated to improving our scope of knowledge and awareness. And we need to have a big scope of knowledge and awareness. But then we have a little teeny tiny scope of influence. Usually our scope of knowledge and awareness does not match our scope of influence. Right now, we need to be aware of what's happening in Iran, what's happening in Gaza. In fact, in what's happening in the 56 wars and armed conflicts that are happening in the world right now, we need to have this awareness. But just because our scope of influence is so much smaller does not mean we should despair, but that we should be realistic and act boldly within our scope of influence. And often what happens when we do is we find the scope of influence gets bigger, and suddenly you are speaking on YouTube in front of a whole bunch of people that you don't even know who they are or where they are, and your scope of influence has gotten much, much bigger. But that's part of the challenge for us. Those things don't match. In addition, the work of justice asks us to do that work with love, even for the oppressor. And that is really hard to do. But we need to know, and Julie gave a beautiful testimony to what this means, that the oppressor is a victim in these systems as well. And so we want the flourishing of all, which means we want the flourishing of the oppressor and the oppressed. And the best way that we can work toward that is to do that with love. The work of justice is also vulnerable and very risky. And in the letter from a Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King talks about how deliberately the people who were part of that movement discerned what the risks were and accepted that they were willing to take on those risks. That letter talks about they knew there might be beatings, that they might be clubbed, that they might be arrested, and maybe they would even die. They knew that they were vulnerable in taking on that risk, and they accepted that risk. Now, in my tradition, we talk about grace, and grace begets grace. But unfortunately, when we talk about nonviolence, nonviolence does not necessarily beget nonviolence. Nonviolence very often begets violence, and we are aware of that. And that is true when we are part of these big movements, and it's true sometimes when we gather with our family at Thanksgiving, isn't it? It can be risky and vulnerable. The other thing here is when we do justice work, we're talking about big feelings. People's lives, people's livelihoods are on the line. And we know that. And because they're big feelings, they provoke big actions, but we still have the power to choose what those actions are, even when they're fueled by anger or disappointment or other big feelings. We choose what our actions are, and we choose to act in nonviolence. The other big challenge for me with justice is that there is not one truth. We want to believe that if we find the truth, there is one truth, and then everybody would understand that one truth and we would all agree on stuff. But that's not necessarily how truth works. So I'm going to do something here. You can try to do it along with me. You don't have to. You can just trust that I'm doing it right and doing what I told you I'm doing. And then you can go home tonight and try it yourself, or you can do it with me now. My finger right now is pointing up toward the ceiling, and it's spinning in a circle. And if I described what my finger was doing to you, I would say, well, my finger is pointing up at the ceiling, moving in a circle, turning clockwise. And you and I would agree. I'm going to tell you right now, my finger is doing nothing different. It is doing exactly what it was before. I am in a different location. And if I describe my finger to you now, I would tell you my finger is pointing upward, spinning in a circle, turning counterclockwise. This is clockwise. This is counterclockwise. My finger's doing the same thing. What has changed is my location. And so two truths that sound like they couldn't possibly be true at the same time actually are. And that's part of why the active listening is so important in our justice work. Because we could choose to debate and discuss what is happening with my finger making a circle. Or we could listen deeply to each other and find out that these two things that sound like they couldn't be true at the same time actually are. And we have more understanding of what is happening because we're talking to each other. And we actually have a deeper understanding of truth. Now, this is just my finger. What I'm talking about is that we come from different cultures, different locations, different ideals. And so we have to do that deep listening to sometimes realize that while our truths sound so different, they're actually describing the same thing. The other thing that I think is important to do when we do justice work is to get ourselves some wisdom guides. I have a bunch. But one who I would like to talk about today is Bernice King. Bernice King is the youngest daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., and she's currently the CEO for the King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. Now, in 2017, when the man who is our current president was first elected president, she put out some guidelines, really talking about Principle 3 here, and justice and nonviolence. And she put out some guidelines that I think is good for us to review today. I'm not going to review them all, but here's a few key ones. At that time, she said, don't use his name, ever. 45 will do. So I call him 47 now. Do not argue with those who support him. It doesn't work. I think we all know that by now. Focus on his policies, not his orangeness or his mental state or the rash on his neck. Focus on the policies. Support artists and the arts, and be careful not to spread fake news. Check it. She also says, keep demonstrations peaceful. In the words of John Lennon, when it gets down to having to use violence, then you are playing the system's game. The establishment will irritate you, pull your beard, flick your face to make you fight. Because once they've got you violent, then they know how to handle you. The thing they don't know how to handle is nonviolence. So where do we start? How do we start? Well, let me tell you a little bit about some of the things that I do. This is just ideas. You can create your own ways of making justice a way of life. For me, I start with prayer. You can do that different. I do believe that thoughts and prayers matter. And for me, thoughts and prayers become direct action. Prayer changes me. Thoughts and prayers become direct action. Thoughts and prayers become blessing. Thoughts and prayers become grace. I do pray for others. In general, I pray For God's desire for their greatest good in bringing forth the flourishing of all of humanity. If I'm going to believe in this justice principle, then we all have a role in bringing out justice and bringing forth the flourishing of all. Now, I said that, but there are some people I find it really hard to pray for. So, when that happens, then I pray for those around them, those people who could influence them possibly and move them toward the actions that would work then for bringing forth the flourishing of all. I also think, in the spirit of arts, that music is a great way for us to practice justice. It's a great way for us to practice crossing boundaries, to get outside of our comfort zone, to learn new things. And it takes 3 minutes a day. So I have a playlist on my phone that's all kinds of justice songs, and usually when I'm driving, the first time I drive in the morning, I listen to some justice songs. So I encourage you to do that as well. And we were listening to some reggae, which was justice music in the beginning, before we got started today. I loved that was happening. Find out who Gangsta Grass is. Find out who Sweet Honey and the Rock are. They have a lot of great justice songs. Here's what I'm going to say, my friends. If you don't have Bad Bunny on your Spotify or your phone right now, you're missing an opportunity to do some justice work. And I know some of you are going to say, but Father Teri, everything's in Spanish. I don't know. Yeah, that's the whole point. Get out of your comfort zone. But I will give you some clues. You're going to have to do some of the homework and research yourself. Bad Bunny. The song in the Super Bowl halftime that he was singing when he was on the electric pole, I promise you, it was a justice song. And I promise you, if you go there and find that song and get it translated, it will make you uncomfortable. That's practicing justice as a way of life. Now, another thing that I do is every Monday, I send this president a postcard. And the postcard first talks about some systemic issue that I am not happy with right now, and I deal with the issue. And then, in the spirit of another one of my wisdom guides, Bishop Buddy, I give him some words of mercy. And then I sign my name in Longmont, Colorado. And I've learned, because one of my issues is also things that have to do with the environment, I've learned, my friends, that you can cut up boxes and make your own postcards. And so I'm putting two of my justice passions together at once. Now, do I think I'm changing the president? No. Do I think maybe I'm on a list somewhere? Yes. But what I'm also doing every week is putting my energy into the world and reminding myself, what are the issues that are important to me? What are the issues that I want to speak up about? What are the issues that I think need to be addressed and change the world? And then to do that in love, I add some words of mercy. Another thing I want to share is that every month, and we do this at Light of Christ, on the 11th of the month, we do something called the 11th Hour Project. It's about raising awareness for the climate and saying that the climate is in its 11th hour. We have to do something. And so on the 11th of every month, at 11 o'clock in the morning, we gather at our church bell outside, and we ring it 11 times, once a minute, for 11 minutes, and then we stand there in silence and in prayer. And this month, we will celebrate our 6th year anniversary of doing that every single month. And I would tell you, those of us who have been doing it for 6 years, we have changed. How we act related to climate and the environment is what has changed. I also am a big supporter of art and the artist. So do what you can to support art and artists. It's a great way to make justice a way of life. Buy the poster. Go to the exhibit, listen to the poet, go to the theater and see the justice plays that are happening, listen to the music. Really support the artists. And if you don't have money, then go to the library. The librarians are great about having different kinds of book displays related to justice issues throughout the library. Go to the library then and check out the books. That supports arts and artists as well. And also I would encourage you to make art. And that's fine if it's with crayons and colored markers, that's okay. Or if you're a sculptor, do that. But make art that taps into your soul and brings forth what you know as the truth related to justice in our world. The other thing that happens when we make art is it helps us use our imagination muscles, and our imagination muscles are really important for doing justice work. And then be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for those large, organized things that fit you and that you can add your energy to. What happens when we do that is we start to combine then our little scopes of influence. And so it gets bigger and bigger, and we have more influence that is more closely aligned with our scope of knowledge and awareness. But when you participate in those things, make sure you participate in non-violent ways. I also encourage everyone to know your part. We're not all meant to be out there marching. Some of us have to make the phone calls. Some of us are really big on social media. Spread the word that way. Know your part. When you do justice work as a way of life, you start to learn what your gifts are. I'm a preacher. I'm not an organizer. In that respect, I'm a joiner. So I love to join things like Habitat is having a speaker series, but I would never have organized a speaker series. And that's my part, and I accept that. Don't compare yourself to what other people are doing. Know your part. And then if you do nothing else, please feed people. Do something that feeds people. Get food out of your own pantry and put it in one of the little pantries in town. Send money to World Central Kitchen. Volunteer at the Round Pantry or the Hour Center. Do something to feed people, because these unjust systems want hungry people, and they continually take benefits and away or make food expensive so that people will be hungry, and hungry people don't function well. And hungry people will do things in despair that they would never do otherwise. Everything that we do to feed people works and makes a difference in the justice movement. Finally, I would remind you that yes, there's a scope of knowledge that's this big, and a scope of influence that's this big. But do you know who's 100% in this scope of influence? You. You have influence over you. Take advantage of it. Challenge yourself. Encourage yourself. Celebrate what you do well, and be honest when you don't get it right. So I have one more poem that I'd like to share with you. It's what I call my Jesus Slam poem. And I think it sort of brings all of these things together. When I was a kid, I went to Catholic school, and I wore plaid skirts, and I watched my grandparents play pool in their basement that smelled like ivory soap, with books on the shelves and a framed picture of the Pope. And I thought Jesus was just like that, surrounded by family and fun, healing and teaching, knowing he was God's only chosen one. Anointed, Messiah, Christed was he, coming from somewhere called Galilee. Rejected by people I knew didn't matter. Betrayed and crucified, his death would shatter. Light beyond dark, life beyond death, resurrection would mean he sighed a new breath. And that's what I thought I needed to know. Believe in this one thing, then to heaven I'd go. I'd be sheep, but not goats. I'd be wheat, but not weeds. I'd be good fish, not bad fish. I'd be good soil for good seeds. Until one day I showed up for the washing of feet. And instead of watching, I was expected to repeat what Jesus had done and told us to do. Take care of one another, stranger, neighbor, and you. Love yourself, love your God, love your enemy too. It's easy to love the one who's loving on you. But Jesus crossed boundaries with his loving and teaching, extending his hands to those who needed reaching. He spent so much time with those on the margins and sharing and feeding those who were starving, speaking truth to the powerful and the powerless too, that the religious authorities grew to dislike him. Ooh, and they were the ones who plotted to strike him. They broke open his body. It bled and it shed, and they tried to silence the things he knew needed to be said. Take care of your brother, your sister, your other. Take care of your father, your neighbor, your mother. Stop judging. Stop fighting. Stop hoarding in barns. Stop looking away from those who've been the most harmed by systems of oppression, suppression, possessions, depression, possession, transgression. It's time for confession for how we're complicit when we look away, for how we contribute to the bleep of our day. Jesus' body was broken, betrayed, and abused. It happens today to Jesus who wears refugee shoes, to transgender Jesus, to Jesus who's gay, to Jesus who divorced, to Jesus who strayed, to Jesus who's homeless or worships in a mosque, to Jesus who is different from whoever thinks they are boss. It wasn't just Jesus anointed and Christed. It was everyone God breathed life into on this earth. And dignity now has been heisted. And what I believe now is not about life after death, but what's happening here, how we offer fresh breath. Gather the sheep and the goats into one single pen. Gather the wheat and the weeds and bring them all in. No boxes to sort us, no lines to dissect. We all are humanity. We are dignity, respect. We each have been Christed. We each are divine. We each can unfasten whatever does bind another or limits their potential and light. Teach each other we are lovable, and then love with all our might. It isn't going to be easy. It wasn't for Jesus, but it's time that we learn that this is what frees us. So get out the basins and the ivory soap and wash. Wash the feet of the people who live on the other streets and pray for each other. Be ready to share your extra shirt and bring along your pool stick and wear your plaid skirt. So my friends, if you see me around the St. Vrain Valley, I hope you will come up to me and say, Father Teri, tell me about your mother's mother, because I have more stories to tell, and I will ask you the same. In the spirit of Dr. Harding, ask me about my mother's mother, but ask other people too, because that is part of how we can build beloved community here in the St. Vrain Valley, with direct action in nonviolent ways, committed to making justice our way of life together. Amen. Amen. Did I give you time for questions?
We're going to have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have?
All right, if we're going to do questions, I ask that you do it this way, though, please, because of course. Tell us your name. Tell us something about your mother's mother. Mm-hmm. And then let's hear your question.
All right, we have a microphone too. And remember, this is for the people online to be able to hear you.
Thank you, Father Teri. My name is Tom Mose. I am also in the ECC, although I attend a church in Fort Collins. And one of the things that you've been a strong advocate for is something called sacramental justice. And it seems like a piece that I didn't really hear in your presentation about choosing justice as a way of life is how we within organized religion might also practice justice. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what sacramental justice is and how it contributes to the beloved community.
All right, so for full disclosure, Tom is my fiance. Good question, Tom. So yeah, sacramental justice is really, I think, a key charism for the Ecumenical Catholic Communion. We are Catholic. We are all about smells and bells. That's a Catholic way of being and experiencing God. In our way of being Catholic, what we believe is that God is inspiring us to work with God to break open those sacraments so that they're available and accessible to everybody. I like to say, especially at the communion table, we don't have a bouncer at the table. What we say each and every time we gather is all are welcome here. And so what we practice then in church around sacrament is what I think are some of the seeds of building beloved community. It doesn't matter where you are politically. We even say it doesn't matter what religion you are. We have folks at my church who have participated in communion who very vocally say they're atheist. We have a couple members who are Jewish. They married somebody who is Catholic. And so we're a very eclectic group of people practicing together, breaking open sacraments so that they're available, accessible to everybody. Now, a lot of people see that as communion first, and that is a priority for us, but you can't break open one sacrament or break open one side of the table. And so that's why you see me as a priest. So we've broken open ordination as well. We are affirming of LGBTQ folks, so we do weddings for people. We've really broken open all of the sacraments. Excuse me. And I think that is the heart then of how we practice justice when we're out in the world and all these other ways of experiencing justice. Did that answer your question satisfactorily, my dear? Thank you.
Somebody else have a question? Are there any online? Somebody's checking that.
My name is Joel, and my mother's mother, her name was Lucille. And when I rolled into Colorado for the first time when I moved here, did not know any restaurants or places to go. We were hungry, and so we were graced with stumbling upon a place called Lucille's and stopped there just because it was my mother's name.
Nice. I love that. Thank you.
My question is, you mentioned discernment and how we have different realities, but I wonder how you would speak to when we're navigating two opposing realities that both feel that they're the subject of injustice.
So yeah, two opposing realities, or I think what brings more conflict to many of us is when we, even within ourselves, have values that are coming in conflict with each other, right? We have a value, I'm trying to think of a good example, and I can't think of one just off the top of my head. And so we have to really wrestle with that, struggle with that, because one is going to have to be the presenting value. It doesn't mean the other value is not a value anymore. It just means in this particular case, we're letting one value lead. And what can happen tomorrow is we know more tomorrow. We understand more tomorrow. Or if you look at the cycle of liberation theology, in liberation theology we talk about, okay, you acknowledge and name a problem. You try to do something justice-wise to change that problem and make it better. Then you evaluate. Did that work? Did it not work? And then you go back to learning and come back to naming the problem. And you're always in this cycle. And so what you decide today, once you learn more and know more, you might decide tomorrow, I'm going to do this different. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, this is perfectly on time, so thank you. And I think we're signing off. We'll see you in 2 weeks from now.